Rarely do I come on the air fanning myself when it is still technically winter for a few more days, but intense negotiations all day between Pate State representatives and the fine folks at the NCAA, because we're supposed to be doing our show on Thursdays. But as you may be aware, March Madness starts on Thursday, the real one, not the play-in garbage that they do before that. And so because they had the selection show early enough on Sunday for us to do our show live, I figured we'd do them a solid and we would let them run unopposed Thursday night, and we would move our Thursday show to Tuesday. The Oscars are too blind to enter into these negotiations, and that's why ratings have been in a tailspin, right? They just go head-to-head against us. And you can't go head-to-head against America's college football show and not suffer the consequences. So, look, we've been no great friend of the NCAA on this program, but I am glad that we were able to come to an agreement. So here we are. We're live as live can be, jam-packed, high atop a glistening downtown Nashville, Tennessee, on this Tuesday night, March 18th, the year of our Lord 2025. What are we? Well, we're proudly brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're happy that Deion Sanders is yet again carrying out all of the ideas that we've had on this show. We're going to talk about that. We're happy to have more intel from spring camps all across the country. We'll talk about that. I'm not going to give you any further indication what this is about. I want to tell you the truth about Lane Kiffin tonight. Half decent chance he's watching the show right now. He doesn't even know what it's about. That'll be later. So we've got a lot to get to. Also, I'm getting a vibe. Granted, it's only March, but I'm getting a vibe. One of those sort of chaos, Renaissance season, wild card season type vibes. It could go away. I don't know. Could pop a Flintstone vitamin or two tonight, and it's all gone in the morning. Or maybe not. I will discuss. They're watching us in St. Paul, Minnesota, Columbia, South Carolina. Macon, Georgia is tuned in. You know who else is tuned back in tonight, Jesse and Colin? Pocatello, Idaho. And we haven't heard from our friends up there in months. I didn't know if they had still been tuned in or not, but they are watching us proudly in Pocatello. We appreciate you guys. Okay, it's a spicy show tonight. We're going a lot of different directions. I don't want to waste any time. I've got a long trip ahead of me tonight. Pate State Speaker Series, 2 big stops this week. I haven't announced them yet, nor will I. You'll find out in due time. But we got 2 major commitments today for the next couple of weeks, including 3 first-time guests on the show coming up over the next few weeks. So it's going to be a very, very fun time. Very fun time. In the meantime, though, how about some spring intel? We got camps opening all across the country. They're open in Clemson. Running back. Question. Not a weakness, but a question. So Phil Moff is gone, and yet most of us are looking at Clemson saying, I kind of like what they're bringing in 2025. I think they could maybe make some noise in 2025. Those words have come out of my mouth. However, God invented spring because there is no perfect team, and so we got to figure out some relative question marks. For example, at the tailback position, they're moving Adam Randall from wide receiver to running back. Now, my hope, their hope, everyone's hope is you pair him with Gideon Davis, true freshman, already kind of turning heads there, and you know, fingers crossed, knock on the fake wood on the set, we suffer no injuries. We hold that together. That makes a solid backfield for us. Love, as much as I have in a long time, where they are at offensive line at Clemson. Love that. I love that Matt Luke is there. Matt Luke has been as good an infusion of energy and new ideas and fresh perspective and just great DNA for that program as anything they've done around there in quite a while. And that's not even to mention his impact in the offensive line room. That's just Matt Luke, the guy. Matt Luke, the person. I think people say human being too often, so the person, whatever. Matt Luke, the human being. We like it. And also the effect he's having on that offensive line room. Now, remember, kids, they also added Tom Allen as defensive coordinator. You most recently saw him at Penn State. And Dabo the other day was talking about one of the things that Tom Allen's got on his plate, and that is to find depth in the cornerback room. I don't know if you saw it. This is like a legacy quote for Dabo Swinney. Dabo's had many, many great quotes, but I'm going to read this to you. I will not do it in Dabo's voice. I would do it disservice, but I'm just going to read the quote. Pretend this is your grammar teacher talking to you. Ain't none of them are ready to play. Thank God we don't play right now. They've all got a ways to go. In every area, name one, name it, that one, That group ain't anywhere near good enough. I hope y'all print that. Well, I asked Jesse, I asked Colin, we do not run a newspaper. We have suspended our magazine subscription service that never got off the ground. We can't print anything, but we can read it. What a Dabo legacy quote. So again, we're in spring. Everyone's supposed to have questions, but Tom Allen, a little ways to go, it feels like, in the corner room, but that's okay. Now, meanwhile, up the road / down the road, wherever you are in the great Palmetto State in South Carolina, is also the University of South Carolina. I come bearing great news, because while we are big fans of multi-sport athletes on this show in high school, we don't like it when you get to college. This is a controversial recruiting tactic that we play at Pate State. I want you playing every sport imaginable in high school, but I'm only recruiting you for one of them. And so when you come here, I want you playing that sport. Well, Nick Harbor, you may remember, was the most recent alien that they recruited out of high school. And you probably saw track footage of him as much as you saw football footage of him. Well, the track, done. He's strictly football this spring, which is a good thing because they are in dire need in the receiver room behind him. There's not much that's proven there. I think there's still going to be a very active participant in the post-spring portal at that position. However, imagine what that means for him. When I say alien, I don't throw that word around lightly. He is 6'5", 235, runs faster than most dudes who were at the Combine last week, 2 weeks ago. He's an amazing athlete, but still has to perfect his craft, hone his craft, and he will do that because this is all he's got to focus on in spring now. Also, they added a running back there. Rasul Faison, probably didn't hear a lot about him. He was a tailback. They added him from Utah State. Okay, he's waiting on what those in the legal community call the PAVIA provision, P squared for short. And that is the kind of provision where you've played like a million years of college football, but one of the years on the front end was at like a community college or a JUCO or something like that, and all of a sudden the courts are randomly finding themselves to be ruling that that shouldn't count as part of your eligibility. Diego Pavia here at Vanderbilt down the street, he just got that, so he's cleared for another year. Well, they're hoping this kid gets cleared for another year. Remains to be seen. Again, one of many reasons God invented spring. We got to develop, and we got to sort out our legal stati. It's the plural of status. Ohio State. What are we doing at left tackle here? Ohio State just recently won the national championship, and offensive line was varying degrees of questionable all year, but then they played great at the right time. Remember last year, although he wasn't around because he got hurt towards the end, Josh Simons, my bad, they went to San Diego State, I believe, and got him. They hit there. Okay, so did they hit again? Because one of the rules on this show is don't lose to food. But you can go take kids from food. And so Ohio State has never done the former, to my knowledge. They've never lost to Rice. May want to check me on that. But they did go get a player from Rice. Ethan here. Onianwa is my guess on the pronunciation of the last name. 6'6", 345. We'd love for him to be down at 345 or 335. Maybe came in a little heavier than that. So that's part of the spring process for him. He was number 91 overall player in the portal cycle. I think they're counting on him to be plug and play at left tackle. I think he will end up being plug and play at left tackle. That's one of the things that we're trying to figure out there because they're losing a bunch of starters on the lines of scrimmage both ways, and offensive line obviously is half of that equation. Also, they're moving C.J. Hicks to D-end, edge. They may have a special classification for it there. Just production. It's one of those age-old things for any of these major programs. Ohio State's no different. Bama used to deal with this. Georgia deals with this. A lot of proven production goes out the door. In this case, JTT and Jack Sawyer combined for 22 sacks last year. Okay, well, they don't have a lot of returning production in that category. What they have is a bunch of really good players whose names you don't know yet. So C.J. Hicks, he's a redshirt junior, so he's been around a little while, but still, he moves different position. One new name, by the way, we keep hearing, and I'm sure the fan base up there is hearing the same thing. Devin Sanchez is a five-star corner. I don't have it in my hand. I think Jesse's holding my purse for me, but I've got some money there that I would love to go over to FanDuel and wager on Devin Sanchez with. I'm not sure there's a prop bet at FanDuel on whether or not freshmen are going to start week one or in the first month of the season or what have you. But I feel good. Feel really good. Devin Sanchez is one of the next great ones at Ohio State. Now, I don't talk a whole lot about Boston College, and I get criticized for it. So here's a little something from our buddy A.J. Black up at Eagle Insider. Bill O'Brien last year, you will remember, they won. And they're top 35 in returning production. And one of the reasons why we're a little sneaky high on Boston College around here is I feel good about the quarterback room. Grayson James was the guy that played for him last year, but Dylan Lonergan transferred there from Alabama. They also added Ty Lockwood, a tight end from Alabama. Feel good about him. They were one of the, scratch that, they weren't one of the, let's just call it like it is. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Boston College was the worst punting team in college football last year. This is how deep we go in spring, immunity. We're talking about Boston College returning punting. Well, in this case, they don't want to return anything because their punting was terrible. So what they did was they went to Ohio? No. Montana? No. They went to Ireland. There was no one in the continental United States good enough to fill the void of punting at Boston College. So they went and got Andy Quinn out of Ireland or Iceland. I think I wrote Ireland. That's how bad it's gotten for me. And he's been booming them in practice. Again, I tell you, the reason we do not even speak the word off-season is because someone's got to break down Boston College's punting situation in March, the week of the NCAA tournament starting. And that show is us. So A.J. Black doing a good job gathering intel there. By the way, our buddies Austin Hannon and Corey Fravel up at Clemson 24/7. I'm telling you, our team sites, some of those guys are really, really good about getting us information. We really appreciate it. You should also know that you may not hear a whole lot out of Tallahassee this spring because Mike Norvell has gone and closed media out. He's done the opposite of what he was doing last year. Last year, I think my sister had a credential to FSU practices a couple of times, and now Mike Norvell has slammed the door in everyone's face. And I think aside from maybe one scrimmage, media is getting locked out of practice. Now, he says that this has nothing to do with them losing last year. Whatever. I don't care if it does have something to do with them losing last year. He doesn't owe me an explanation. And who knows? Maybe all media won't be locked out. Maybe some media will find their way down there behind the curtain in Tallahassee this spring. But yeah, it looks for now like there may be changes in media policy in Tallahassee. And if they go 11-1 this year, Mike Norvell may never talk to a reporter again. You may never see the inside of a practice facility again down there. What you can do is you can take yourself over to Academy Sports and Outdoors, and they don't ever close down. Even if they're mad at you, it'd be terrible business practice for Academy to close their doors to you. So Mike Norvell may close his door in your face, but Academy never will. I feel like we've been really, really anti-Mike Norvell the last 2 minutes, and it's not that way. I promise it's not that way. But we are pro Academy Sports and Outdoors. So here's the situation. It was 77 degrees in Nashville today. You could have done pretty much anything you want to outdoors. You could have gone fishing. You could have gone biking. You could have gone hiking. You could have gone to a Little League game. You could have had children playing in a Little League game, in which case you're far more vested in it. Any of these things can be done. A trip to Academy Sports and Outdoors is ideal beforehand. If you cannot get there in person, fear not. Academy.com has you covered. I know people probably have noticed and are probably a little perturbed that there is no cream soda Zevia on the set tonight. That's because in a last-minute audible, I went with normal cola. And it's because we're stockpiled with it because I've been going nothing but cream soda. So I had forgotten what it tasted like. So we're going back to cola for tonight. Same zero sugar taste, same deliciousness, just different flavor. I am so happy with what I'm about to talk about. I'm so happy at the words written on this piece of paper here. Deion Sanders, some of you love him, some of you hate him. Shame on you if you do. There's no room for hate in college football unless you're talking about a rival. But there has been a guaranteed winning idea just sitting on the table in front of everyone in college football forever, and people have been scared. And so they've sat back and they've waited for someone else to take the first bite. And then Deion Sanders came along and said, why is no one else partaking? I will. And he just yanked the plate towards himself this week. What are we talking about? Real games for the spring game. That's what we're talking about. So Deion Sanders walked in, looked around and said, some of you are canceling your spring games. Don't like that. On the other hand, can't really figure out my depth situation the way I want to with the current setup. I'd love to do what they do in the NFL. I'd love to get a real-life team. Maybe it's an FCS team. Maybe it's a team that's on par with us. Maybe it's a team that's better than us. Maybe it's North Carolina or Syracuse or someone. And I'd love to host them for the spring game, and then we'll go to their place the next year. This has always been common sense. The only reason we don't do it is because someone hadn't done it. You think I misspoke there. I didn't. That's most of the reason why good ideas don't get practiced in college football. It's not that they're not a good idea. It's that everyone's terrified to be first. No one wants to be first. No one wants to be third. Third. Well, Deion Sanders wants to be first. So if you're just getting around to learning about this, that's okay. This is a big deal. I'm excited about this. So let me take you to a couple of days ago. Deion Sanders was having a press conference there in Boulder, kickoff of spring practice, and when asked about the spring game, he said the following.
I like to play against another team in the spring. That's what I'm trying to do right now, to have it competitive. Playing against your own guys kind of get monotonous, and you really can't tell the level of your guys because, you know, it's the same old. Everybody kind of know each other towards the end. I would like to style it like the pros. I would like to practice against someone for a few days, then you have the spring game. And I think the public will be satisfied with that tremendously. I think it's a tremendous idea. Yeah, I've told those personnel who should understand that it's a tremendous idea.
Yep. Not only is Deion Sanders right here, Deion Sanders nailed it. Deion Sanders is looking at a good idea that many, many people before him could have looked at and said, yeah, we'll do it. And for whatever reason, they didn't. And he's saying, yeah, we'll do it. So scheduling a real opponent for a spring game, there are like 57 positives. I think it's a wonderful idea. I've wanted it for a long time. I've been so curious. What's the negative? What's the downside? I asked a few people, what are the potential negatives? What are the potential pitfalls? Thad, just in the chat right now, just in the live chat right now, he pointed out one of the most obvious. And he said, if you have a real spring game, that's a perfect opportunity for other teams to scout your players and then poach them at the last minute. You are correct. I don't think it's going to be a problem much longer, Thad. I don't think we're going to have a post-spring transfer portal much longer. So I think that issue will take care of itself. Now, at that point, I think that alone will be cause to bring the spring game back for many people who are canceling it right now. But forget about that. Let's not just take one step forward after we took one step back. Let's take 15 steps forward. Deion looked at it and said, not only do I want to have a spring game, I want to have a spring game. And so I looked around and I said, well, of course you should want that. Everyone should want that. It'd be a win for everyone. Who loses? I did have someone come on the Twitters yesterday, and they tried to argue against it. And I thought these were terrible points, but I respected the feedback. So I'm just going to read it one by one. I'll shoot these down. If you're listening on podcast, James came and he said, hey, man, this has been a hot topic, but it's a very bad idea. I can't believe anyone would take it serious. First point, he said, unnecessary additional injury exposure for players, which is demonstrably false. Like, this is a terrible point, and everyone makes it. If we play a real spring game, guys could get hurt. Well, first off, guys get hurt either way. Secondly, has anyone done the math on this? When you are playing against somebody, you got 11 of your guys on the field. When you're playing yourself, you got 22 of your guys on the field. So if you're going to practice the same way you practice anyway, the net result is you got an equal injury chance. When you get to the spring game itself, you've got half the injury risk that you would have had. So that's debunked. Number two, James said this would waste valuable practice days on game prep that could otherwise be spent on young player development. James, we're not just talking about scheduling a game. We're talking about scheduling a week. What Deion Sanders is talking about, to be very clear, is not just bringing North Carolina into Boulder to play them on a Saturday. He's talking about bringing North Carolina into Boulder on a Monday and having a few joint practices against North Carolina the same way the Bills and Chiefs would do it in the NFL during minicamp and whatnot, and then having your game on Saturday. If anything, your players are getting more out of it. And especially if you listen to these coaches talk about how they actually want to learn about their players and develop their players in spring practices, it helps more not less. It helps more. So that one's debunked. Then he said it's an unnecessary new demand on coaches and their families. To be real, I have no idea what that means. No idea what that means. There's not a second's more workload on your plate than already would have been there. In the aggregate, I guess you get to meet some new people. I have no idea what that means. Last point James made, he said, this also bucks the emerging trend in spring activity, which is to set aside the game and its overhead for other forms of fan engagement. James, I know that's a catchy buzzword right now, engagement. Let me tell you what the best piece of fan engagement that ever existed in football is. Football! That's the best fan engagement. So I want you to go to Lubbock, Texas, or I want you to go to Syracuse, New York, or Blacksburg, Virginia, and you ask them, would you rather have an autograph session with the tight ends, or would you rather watch them play a game? See what kind of feedback you get on that. There's no lose. There's no one losing here. So we have touted this for a long time. As I've said, one of my platforms, scratch that. If we were not live, I'd have Colin cut what I just said. We don't believe in if. One of my platform focus points when I am college football commissioner has always been to give you the option to play a real game in spring. You don't have to, but I'm going to give you the option to. And here's how we've always laid it out. You find a partner to dance with. So you find another school who wants to do it. I've got CBS or ESPN or Fox or NBC just ready, willing, and able. They're starving in the spring. Their shelves are virtually bare. What are you talking about? If you don't have the NCAA tournament, if you don't have the Masters, if you don't have those contracts, what are you doing in terms of live events in the spring? So ESPN or CBS or Fox or NBC would readily come to the table and say, hey, we'll pay you $2 or $3 million for this. And you say, heck yeah. And so you go and you schedule it the way you want to, and you bring them into town on Monday, and you have a few joint practices, and then you play yourselves a game on Saturday. You ticket $5 or $10 a piece to where it's still very affordable. You make a gate, but it's very affordable for families that maybe can't afford it in the fall to come to campus. You've got a media partner on board. You get the great exposure. You also think about the marketing opportunities you have here. Think about the special one-time only jerseys that you could wear. There's an example there. There are many different things that you could do to maximize revenue here. And revenue maximization, you better do. Because every one of you's got to pay $15 or $20 million out of your pocket now that you didn't used to have to pay out. And not all of you can afford it readily. So you better be searching for revenue streams. So you get all that taken care of. Also, the fans win because they get an event in the spring. The players win on multiple fronts. They probably make a little more money off of that, but they also maximize their development, and therefore they're maximizing their potential more than they otherwise would have. The school benefits because they make more money. And here's the last part. Anyone who's got a problem with it can just keep walking. No one's mandating this. Deion Sanders didn't say, I want everyone to be forced to do this. Did you hear what he said? He said, I want the opportunity to be able to do this, which is all it ever should be. If you want to do it, fine. If you don't, fine. There's this weird group of people that wander, mainly the internet, but some of these people really exist, and they hear an idea and they say, I don't like that idea. I don't want anyone to be able to do it. Well, it's really none of your business what anyone else does. You can mandate it for yourself, but then your power stops in the mirror. So if I want to do it and it's legal, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And you can sit it out if you don't like it. This is going to happen, by the way. I've gotten a lot of feedback on this. This is going to happen. Like real games as spring games are going to happen. You can shape it however you want. You can structure the week leading up to it however you want. I think you'll probably see home and homes agreed to in spring games, by the way. I think if North Carolina goes to Boulder, Colorado, and that's, by the way, that's who they're talking to. Colorado's talking to North Carolina. If North Carolina were to go there this year, Deion and company would go right back over to Chapel Hill next year. So everyone wins. Everyone gets a home date. The media partners on board with it. The fans win. Everybody wins. And if you think this is a losing idea, then you can sit it out. It's going to happen. Everyone's finding every other way imaginable to create a new revenue stream for their athletic department. You think they're going to let this one go by the wayside? They'll figure it out. This will happen as soon as this year. But I think almost certainly in the coming years, that's going to happen. That's not an if. That's a when. Now, that's just spring football. That's just, those games don't count. That's just spring. Do we think FanDuel would put lines out? Somebody hit Dave and Susan up over there. You guys, You guys gonna hang Colorado -3.5 against North Carolina if they play in the spring? I don't think it's such a great idea, but we'll see. 2025 season is still several months away. But I think the 2025 college football season has real chaos, sort of wild card potential. You can decide whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for a few reasons, I'm already starting to get this vibe. So what is it? It's March 18th. I just want to put this out there so that we're on the record as having said it long before it happens. Think about all of the variables in the landscape this year. So first off, it's the last year of NIL being what it is right now, which is pay for play. The revenue sharing era is coming. Well, that's just a lot of words to you. But what that means to you is a lot of people are emptying the dump truck of their NIL money right now because they don't really think they're going to have to spend like that anymore. They're probably right. I know of many instances where programs looked and they front-loaded a guy's deal because it's the last time they're really going to have to pay him like that. After, well, including this year, revenue sharing kicks in. Well, what that means is there's a lot of volatility in rosters right now. There was a weird movement cycle in rosters right now, not to mention you've still got the usual situation where the usual haves have had their second layer cut out from under them because teams vastly overspent, in many cases, let's just call it what it is, on their twos and their threes. Again, I'm going to leave it up to you to decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. And that probably means you've got a little bit more variability, variance, whatever you want to call it, in the college football cake this year, as opposed to the usual structure and set number of teams that can win the national title, which leads me to my next point. I'm looking at a piece of paper in front of me right now. I have no idea who the clear number one in college football is to start this year. And normally we have that. And for that matter, normally we have a solid top five. We don't. We really don't have it this year. Think about Oregon and Ohio State and Texas and Georgia. They all replace quarterbacks, guys. They're all below 50% returning production. Those are the top four teams in the odds to win the title, which means in the land of the blind, you know, the one-eyed man can be king. You look at a guy with one eye, and normally you don't think much of him. If he lives in the land of the blind, he could rule the whole place. Well, in college football this fall, you look at a Penn State. Be very careful with how you talk about Penn State. Be very careful with how you talk about a team like Clemson or a team like Ole Miss, because your default is, oh, they're not going to win a title. Oh, that kind of team can't win a title. No, that kind of team in 2019 wouldn't beat that LSU. That kind of team in 2021 wouldn't beat that Georgia. You don't know if we're going to have that caliber team this year. So number three, think about all that, and then think about the vast disparity in strength of schedule out there. Think about how imbalanced these schedules are, not just conference to conference, within a conference. We've talked about this a lot over the past month. I've pointed this out. I think we'll probably make this point a dozen more times on the show as we sort of get towards media days and then fall camp opening up. The schedules are garbage this year. I don't mean there's no big games. There's a ton of big games. I just mean some teams are playing way more big games than others. In our own internal metrics, we've got Oklahoma strength of schedule as being at a 116. Tennessee, same conference, down at a 79. We got Oklahoma, I think we have them playing either 8 or 9 Tier 1/Tier 2 opponents. We've got Tennessee playing 4. They're in the same conference. Because we've got 14, 16, 18 team conferences now, that can happen. Because our scheduling model's broken and we schedule in the future still when there's no reason we couldn't do it the year of. So we've got that going for us. And also, like I said, I just want to circle back around to this. The usual take in college football, I've been guilty of it as well. The usual take, history has taught us in college football to think in terms of a very, very finite amount of teams that are capable of winning it all. And I just don't think that's the case this year, because there may not be an elite team out there this year. There is a ton of newness amongst the usual suspects. Like I said, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, all new at quarterback, all below 50% returning production. One of them may elevate, and all this could be a moot point. But if you don't have one emerge, or if someone doesn't do like Ohio State last year and get red hot and unbeatable in the playoffs, that means stuff that normally couldn't happen can happen. That means a Notre Dame could win a national title. That means a Penn State could win a national title. That means a Tennessee or an Ole Miss could win a national title. And even as I'm saying that, with my logic presented, I know you guys, because you're just like me, your guys are sitting there listening to that and saying, yeah, okay, but that's not going to happen. It probably won't happen. You could say Texas A&M probably won't win a national title. You can't rule it out. Because you got to show me someone they definitively can't get past. We don't have that. We got some teams that would be favored against them. We don't have anyone right now. Granted, it's March, but we don't have anyone that they couldn't get past because you don't even know what A&M is yet. They're watching us in Mobile, Alabama. Allegedly, they're watching us in Raleigh, but I don't know, my paper ripped. And they're watching us in Akron, Ohio. Thank you guys so much. There it is, 5 Adam there in the live chat. After pouring my heart out, quote, Notre Dame and Penn State are not winning. All right, there it is. Well, guys, that's our show. It's not. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I guess I don't get it. Do we have concerns? Yes, we've got concerns about everyone. Randall from Athens, Georgia hit me. He said, why am I not excited about Georgia's offense? I feel like I love a lot of the pieces coming back, like Frazier and Humphreys and Oscar Delp, but I feel that seniority will be the deciding factor at quarterback, and that discourages me. Well, if there's one thing I've learned about Kirby Smart, it's that he's still got a long way to go before he learns how to run a football program. So, that was mean. I shouldn't have said that. Not mean to Kirby. He can take it. That was sarcasm, and that was mean to the guy that presented the question. Let's take that question for what it was. I want to work back to front, immunity. You're worried that favoritism, no. You're worried that seniority will win out at quarterback, and that discourages you. Humbly, what should win out at quarterback? Because I don't think seniority is going to win out at quarterback. I think superiority is going to win out at quarterback. So, yeah, if I had to guess, I'd probably say Gunnar Stockton's the guy Kirby Smart's going to roll with. I don't think it's because Gunnar Stockton is fill-in-the-blank years old. I think he's the guy that gives them the best chance to win come fall. Now, apparently the connotation there in the question was Ryan Puglisi is the guy with the higher upside. He may be, but see, that's the difference. That's the benefit you get to exercise sitting at home. You get to say that consequence-free. You don't have to live with the mistakes the guy with the higher upside may deliver. They're dealing with this all over the country. You got a lot of young quarterbacks. Tuscaloosa's like this. Keelan Russell comes in. Man, I hope he starts. I hope he starts over Ty Simpson. Why? If he's not the better guy for the job, why would you hope that? And just like at Georgia. Listen to what the guy just said. Man, I hope seniority doesn't win out. Well, don't you hope superiority wins out? Like it always will, because Kirby Smart's job's on the line, depending on that stuff. So usually there's no favorites played there. His favorite is the guy that gives him the best chance to win. And that's probably going to be Gunnar Stockton. And if it's not, then you'll know, because he won't be the one starting, and someone else will be the one starting. I still think that a lot of people who watch this show are 30 or 40, anybody above 30 years old. It's safe to say, well, actually everybody. Pretty much everybody watching the show now has grown up in the highlight era. Because even in the 90s, SportsCenter ruled. And so we've got an entire multi-generational audience that grew up in the highlight era. So when you think about a player, you do not think about all 22 cut-ups. You do not think about practice footage. You do not think about drill work. You do not think about the film room. You think about highlights. With Puglisi, it's probably Elite 11 or high school stuff. But even then, you think about highlights. You think about his star rating, and you think about highlights. With Gunnar Stockton, same way. Anybody, it's not just quarterbacks. You think in terms of highlights. Coaches think in terms of totality. They can't do that. If you're going to show a guy's highlights, you better show the mundane 2nd and 3 throwaways as well. Or better yet, the one he tried to fit in there, and it goes the other way. But that happened at Tuesday in practice, so you didn't see it. But guess who did see it? The guy who's got to make the decision on who starts. So I think the way it'll play out at Georgia is the way it's always played out. And if Gunnar Stockton gives them the best chance to win, but he's not good enough ultimately to get them better than 8-4, well, then Georgia will just go 8-4. But it won't be because they started the wrong guy at quarterback. And by the way, that's not to say coaches' decisions are infallible. Because we've seen recent examples of guys who went through a spring and then a fall camp and they won the quarterback battle. Then they may get hurt and the backup comes in and he plays better than the starter had. It's not a perfect science. They don't know everything. They just know more than you do about their team. That's all I'm saying. I do get the concern, though. The thing about it is if you would have just said, why do I feel concerned about Georgia this year, and stopped there, I would have agreed with you. They were 102nd in rush yards per game last year. That's well off the mark. That's not Kirby Smart football. And for that matter, the defense fell out of the top 20 in points per game allowed since the first time he got here. So running the ball and defense are things that I've woken up every morning of the past decade or so and thought I could rely on in Athens, Georgia. They didn't have either one of them last year. And hey, by the way, here's the rest of the joke. They still won the league. Shame on the rest of you. They still won the league. And they probably looked in the mirror and said, who are we this year? All right, we'll put the championship ring on anyway. In a down year, they just won the SEC last year. Now, concern for this year? Valid. I don't think they'll be 12th in the country in pass yards per game this year, which they were last year, which is the only thing that kept them afloat offensively. So I don't think they'll be that. They lost their top 7 sack providers, but Georgia's kind of like Ohio State. They got a lot of guys that everyone wanted out of high school in recruiting. You just don't know their names yet because they hadn't started yet. That's the beauty of college football. The beauty of college football, unlike the NFL, is it is very much still a developmental part of the sport. In the NFL, you're a commodity. You're supposed to already be developed. No one really goes into Brown's minicamp wondering whether a no-name will emerge. In college, we see it happen multiple times on every team every year. Georgia's no different. If you're a hardcore recruiting fan, you know their roster. If you're a casual college football fan who lives in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, you don't know their roster. But you probably will, because if history is any indication, no-names become stars every year at the major programs. And it's one of the beautiful things about this time of year, because if they had to play right now, they'd be a total wreck. And yet you watch guys like Kirby Smart take teams that would look like a total wreck if they had to play in March, and then come November, looks like a well-oiled machine. It's imperfect. Not every year is at the same caliber. Last year wasn't. But again, if their down year has them competing for and winning a conference title, then it usually is a pretty good indicator they know what they're doing. And there's quick trips on like every corner in that state. So I should know. I grew up there. May be back there sooner rather than later. Again, whomst amongst us know, whomst to the funk that we'd drive 1,000 miles last Saturday for storm chasing? You never know. Quick Trip does, though. Inevitably, they know it's coming, and therefore they know they got to be ready to fuel us. And they have, and they will continue to. It could be cold brew on tap. It could be gasoline on tap. One is for you to consume. One is for your vehicle to consume. But Quick Trip's got it all. We appreciate them. They've been fueling the show and the tour, and basically every time we got to hit the road. And we thank them for it. It's time to tell the truth. Colin, I've been thinking about the best way I can intro this. And here's what happened. Backstory. Colin, this is not for the cut. So here's what was happening. I was having a little convo with someone. It's one of those buddy to buddy, one of those B2B convos where you just bounce all over the place. And Lane Kiffin comes up. And we were talking about him. I mean, you were both kind of the same age, and we're both diehard college football fans, football in general, really. And so we're talking about how wild his story was. And then I realized, like, every time you make a point about Kiffin, someone else makes another point, and then it's like a ping pong ball. So, Colin, here's a good end point. We like telling the truth around here about teams, about players, but also about coaches. And I was thinking about Lane Kiffin. No two people have the same take on him. If I were to ask, hey, lifelong college football fan, I've never watched the game. Tell me about Lane Kiffin. 10 different people would tell 10 different stories. What's the truth? What's the truth about Lane Kiffin? Well, you could describe him as enigmatic. You could call him a guru. You could call him complicated. Though, he's entering year 6 at Ole Miss. So I think a lot of folks, me included, still feel like he kind of just got there. The Ole Miss Lane Kiffin thing is still kind of new. That's certainly not where you start with the Kiffin story. But if you work most recently backwards, he's over half a decade in at Ole Miss, and I don't think people realize this because there's so much layering to the way you would describe Lane Kiffin that you almost have 10 minutes worth of content before you get around to the idea that Kiffin's one of the best head coaches in America, and nobody realizes it. Josh, Lane Kiffin? Yeah, Lane Kiffin. You want to do yourself a favor? If you want to wipe all the bias away, remove the name Lane Kiffin. Just have a blind resume. If I tell you a guy's coaching at Ole Miss and he's put 3 double-digit win seasons together in the last 4 years, and you know your history, you would know it took Ole Miss from 1971 to 2020 to do that 3 times. He's done it 3 times in 4 years. They would have made the expanded college football playoff multiple times in those years if it would have been around. And also, he's had one of the best offenses in the sport virtually every year. He is, I think, begrudgingly leaned into the portal, and they were well ahead of the curve on how to play the NIL game. So again, because it's Lane Kiffin, people say, oh, Lane Kiffin. And then they just start going off on these tangents about non-football related matters. Hey, man, Kiffin's got just chapter after chapter of non-football related content in the eventual biography, maybe autobiography, but biography that they'll write on him. But the football piece can't be denied at this point. How do you deny it? And the other thing about Kiffin that's the truth that I don't think most folks realize is he's way more old school in his approach. Kiffin's way more old school in the way he sees the game than you think. You may think about Kiffin and you may think, oh man, he runs his mouth on Twitter too much. He's just nothing but a troll. Well, yeah, he likes to have fun. I think a lot of that is purely social media because in person, that's really not what he's like. But I want you to think about the approach old school coaches would take to today's game. You can go way back, man. You can go back to like the 60s, 70s, 80s. I really truthfully don't think most folks realize how similar Lane Kiffin is in his philosophy about the game as those guys are. If you mention Woody Hayes or Bo Schembechler and then Lane Kiffin, you think, oh, they got nothing in common. Well, you know, we were looking through the archives today. Do you remember the name DeSanto Rollins? Most of you don't. If you do, man, gold star for you. DeSanto Rollins was a kid, 6'4", about 300, just decides to skip 2 weeks of practice. Claims it's mental health related. We saw through it at the time. Lawsuit ended up getting dismissed. It was garbage. Dude just didn't want to practice. And so he tried to hide behind mental health because it was really, really popular to do that at the time. And if you take that seriously, then you also need to call it out when it's used as a BS excuse. That's how old school coaches would have dealt with that. Well, the thing about this dude is he goes in to meet with Lane Kiffin and he secretly recorded a conversation, which is legal in Mississippi. It's a one-party consent state. So he goes in there, and I want you to imagine your Paul Bryants or your Bo Schembechlers or your Newt Rockneys, and you go in after skipping 2 weeks of practice, and they've been summoning you to the coach's office, and you've just said, I'm not ready to meet with the coach yet for 2 weeks. And then you go in and meet with the coach. You tell me it would sound a whole lot different than this. Roll it, Colin.
If you would have come here when you kept getting messages, the head coach wants to talk to you, and you saying, I'm not ready to talk to him.
I wasn't.
Well, what f***ing world do you live in?
I don't see why you gotta be disrespectful, honestly.
Get out of here. Go. You're off the team. You're done. See ya.
Because I'm...
See ya. Go. And guess what? We can kick you off the team. So go read your f***ing rights about mental health. We can kick you off the team for not showing up. When the head coach has to meet with you and you don't show up for weeks, okay, we can remove you from the team. It's called being the It's called hiding behind and not showing up to work.
Wasn't trolling there, was he? So also with the portal stuff, you know, with the talent acquisition stuff, look, I think there's a lot about the sport right now Lane Kiffin detests that he leans into because he has to, because that's the only way you can win right now. But I do think his approach is way more old school than most realize. I would also say this, and this is where I just cross both fingers. At any given point, if you look around, you could cover NASCAR, you could cover equestrian, you could cover pop culture. I cover college football. At any given point, you look around the landscape of the field you're in. This could be your senior class if you're in high school right now. Which figure in that landscape do you think would be best cut out to be like the focal point of a multi-part Netflix series down the road? And it's Lane Kiffin right now in college football. There's not even a close number two. If you found out that 10 years from now, there will be a 10-part docuseries. It's unfiltered. Everybody tells the truth. Everybody participates. Lane Kiffin would be slam dunk number one. I don't even know who number two would be. Who would number two be? There's not even a close second. Do you understand? This dude's not 50 years old yet. You go all the way back to the Pete Carroll, like Matt Leinart USC days. He's then the Raiders head coach in his early 30s. He then goes to Tennessee for 1 year as the head coach, then bolts, and it was a wild scene in Knoxville as he tried to get out of there, and he goes to USC. Then they end up leaving him on the tarmac, and he gets fired. Then he goes and is just a whipping boy for Nick Saban for 2 years, the most oil and water combination imaginable, and yet it yields fantastic results. And then he's fired the week of the national title game. It was so bad. It got so contentious. Saban said, I know we're playing Clemson in the national title game in a few days. I'm going to fire my offensive coordinator, mainly because his backup is a guy named Steve Sarkisian, so I feel comfortable doing it. I'm just going to fire Lane Kiffin. Then Kiffin goes to FAU, and then all he does is win, and then he gets the Ole Miss job. He's not 50 years old yet. It sounds like he's 114 years old. He's not 50 years old yet. So the truth about Lane Kiffin, it's complicated, but there's some things you can't deny. And here's what's most important, since he happens to be a football coach. He's one of the best football coaches in America. We haven't done our head coaching power ratings for this year. We will. But where is Lane Kiffin? And before you dismiss him, before you tell me he's overrated, you better tell me what he's rated, and you better tell me who's put together a body of work that's ahead of him. There are some out there. I'm not putting him ahead of Kirby Smart. No one's arguing Lane Kiffin greater than Ryan Day. However, I'm arguing that you get your usual names out of the way. You don't get too far down the list before you've got to start acknowledging Lane Kiffin. The truth about Lane Kiffin. Did we think we'd use that headline at 1:30 in the afternoon today? No, we did not. But you never know. Conversations on the Josh, yield some of the best content on the show. FanDuel would do good by themselves to hear when I say we're going to do our head coaching power ratings coming up and to just go over/under on Lane Kiffin. What do we think? Off the top of your head, if you were to power rate every head coach in America right now, over/under, what's 8.5, 9th and a half, 10th and a half? Like, where would you put the over/under for Lane Kiffin, like where he falls in head coaching power ratings? They're not going to do it because there could be corruption, because I absolutely would insider trade on that. I would tell Colin what the results are, and then Colin would end up in prison, and I don't want any of that. So, on second thought, it's probably a better idea for a screenplay than an actual prop bet on FanDuel. But I'll tell you what you can get over there. Every bit of March Madness action you could ever want. You can get it over at FanDuel right now. And if you look and you say, this isn't a basketball show, I would say, yeah, okay. Well, if you want to be hard-headed, go bet the over on Miami team win total this year in the fall, because it's also there. So FanDuel, exclusive odds provider of the show. The FanDuel family is growing and growing and growing, and we're so happy to be a part of it. All right, last question, and then I've got a long drive ahead of me tonight. This is not something I normally talk about in spring, but I got to be honest, this one caught my eye. W. Sharp from Rochester, Minnesota hit me. He said, I just saw the Heisman odds, and it's shocking how little talent there is at quarterback this year. Are we about to see back-to-back non-quarterback Heismans? Well, hold on a second. We were just talking about FanDuel. So 36 of the top 39 favorites to win the Heisman this year are quarterbacks. So quarterback shark fin is still very, very prominent off the Heisman shores. A really good combination of words there, by the way. But the talent, hold on a second. So he said, Jesse, that the talent is down at quarterback this year. How do we know that? How do we know that proven production is down at the quarterback position this year? But I got a list in front of me of just like Arch Manning. How do you know how good he's going to be this year? How do you know how talented he is? Garrett Nussmeier's returning. DJ Lagway, he's not even throwing in camp right now, but he probably will in the fall. Cade Klubnik, how do you know what he's going to be this year? Dante Moore starts for Oregon. He could be a star this year. Julian Sayin, ditto for Ohio State. Nico Iamaleava, just because he was relatively modest statistically year one, he's playing for Josh Heupel. He's a stud. They're paying him a ton of money. He's a former five-star guy. Everyone wanted him. You're telling me he can't level up his production significantly? Drew Aller's back again. We got Sellers over at South Carolina. Mateer just transferred to Oklahoma. Austin Simmons is going to be a breakout star at Ole Miss. Carson Beck, a lot going on, non-football related right now, but eventually he will strap it up down at Miami. There's all kind of talent. It's just unproven at the college level. There's all kind of talent. But I will grant you this. There are some good non-quarterbacks out there. But think about what it took last year. Travis Hunter won this thing last year. It took him playing both ways to win it. Devontae Smith won it at wide receiver, and he also, I think, had a quarterback that was the finalist. So that's always the catch-22. If Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State ends up doing it, it was probably Julian Sayin throwing him the ball. So is it one of those inverted dynamics where the wide receiver outshines the quarterback? Could be. Could be. He's fourth overall, Jeremiah Smith in the odds. So that's probably the guy who does it if someone does it. Ryan Williams is number 18 overall. He could be another one. It could be, I think it would be a wide receiver. If it's not a quarterback, I think it'd be a receiver. But the other one that is there and will get his shot is Jeremiah Love this year at Notre Dame. Tailback up there. He's number 20 overall. But, man, I don't know about this no talent at the quarterback position. What year have we ever gone through in college football where there wasn't Heisman caliber talent anywhere in the country at quarterback? It may be lesser than some years than others, but I read you a list, 3, 6. I read you 12 names at quarterback, and I didn't even list all the ones that could theoretically contend. So my money'd still be on a quarterback. I don't bet the Heisman in March, but number one, if I did, I'd do it at FanDuel. Number two, my money would still be on a quarterback. Okay, here's what's happening. I have got a couple of big visits to make this week. Follow on the socials at Josh Pate CFB. Probably see me posted up in a weight room near you very soon. In fact, I've confirmed what time are they done with practice tomorrow? About a 2:15 lift tomorrow. One of my favorite weight rooms to work out in. I will also be sitting down with the head coach of said institution. And then the next day we'll rinse, repeat, and we'll do it again. So we're very busy. We're on the road a lot. Eventually these full-length sit-down conversations will drop on the YouTube channel, trying to juggle the March Madness schedule and not having it drown in that. But our next show will be Sunday, live. Until then, for Director Colin, for Producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless.